Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a deeply unsettling timeline of events, all meticulously documented in public records, court dockets, and official correspondence. We're unpacking the story of Corey Stickney's relentless 5-year search for his 3 children. And right up front, you need to know this isn't just your standard custody dispute. It is a highly documented case study of what actually happens when child protection systems completely fail to act, and how a protective parent can be repeatedly, systematically silenced by the exact institutions that are supposed to help. So, where are Charlie May, Callie Joe, and Christian Island? That is the central, desperate question at the very heartbeat of this entire case. When we look through the source documents, we see a father asking this question over and over again, practically begging for someone, anyone, to listen to him, while state agencies seemingly just looked the other way. 5 years. Just take a second to really think about that. That's half a decade this father has spent searching for his kids. Imagine waking up every single day for 5 years, not knowing if your children are safe, not knowing where they sleep at night, and just hitting a massive bureaucratic brick wall every single time you try to find out. Let's look at exactly how this nightmare started.
Section 1. The Empty House. A Father's Worst Nightmare.
Section 2. The Civil Matter Myth. Bureaucratic gaslighting. Now, you might be thinking, isn't taking kids across state lines to hide them illegal? Well, yes, absolutely. There's a massive gap here between what the law says and what actually happened. Under Kansas Statute 215409, removing a child across state lines to conceal them without consent is a severity level 7-person felony. To put that in perspective, that is the exact same class of felony as aggravated assault. It is literally not a civil matter. Yet, the institutional response across the board was uniform inaction. Local law enforcement refused to take reports, Kansas DCF closed abuse cases as unsubstantiated, and the Attorney General's office, they simply declined jurisdiction and tossed it right back to the local agencies. Section 3. A Father Silenced, Screaming into the Void. The documents show an absolutely relentless fight. Corey wasn't just sitting by. He was actively rejecting the state's brush-offs and demanding his constitutional rights. You can feel the desperation in his own words. In his direct correspondence to the Attorney General of Kansas, he demands a formal investigation. He specifically calls out his 14th Amendment rights and the exact statutes meant to prevent parental kidnapping, laying out very clearly that multiple felonies are taking place. But tragically, he was continually ignored. It's incredibly frustrating because this protective parent was essentially forced to independently advocate for his own children's status as victims of a crime, simply because the state refused to recognize them as such. He had to play the role of investigator and lawyer, all while carrying the crushing emotional trauma of losing his kids. And as the timeline unfolds, the systemic failure becomes undeniable. The initial abduction happened back in November 2021. By October 2022, after local agencies totally failed to act, Corey submitted a formal request to the U.S. Department of Justice. Still, no active recovery was coordinated. By December 2023, he hit a total blackout, completely blocked on all platforms. And this unmonitored concealment, it ultimately culminated in a violent assault in June 2024. Section 4. The Hidden Danger, From Concealment to Crisis. While all those local agencies were busy classifying this whole situation as a harmless, civil matter, the reality of what was actually happening to those children was absolutely horrifying. On June 14, 2024, the state of Kansas filed a 13-count criminal indictment against Jeffrey Todd Slife, the man who was living with Corey's children. Listen to these charges: 5 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, which in this case was a Chevy truck, 3 counts of aggravated endangering a child, and 5 counts of criminal restraint. This was severe felony violence directed right at the children and their mother. The bitter irony here is just hard to stomach. The source material points out that these are literally the same children DCF had repeatedly cleared as unsubstantiated, the same environment every agency called a civil matter. Time and time again, the state cleared the abuser's environment, completely ignoring the father's documented warnings until physical violence actually erupted. And the trauma wasn't just physical. The sources detailed some profound psychological manipulation, too. The children were allegedly instructed to call this abuser Dad. That is identity erasure. The institutional failure to intervene didn't just physically hide these children away. It actively allowed the psychological erasure of their real, biological, protective father. But honestly, it gets even worse. Slife is currently facing a second, entirely separate prosecution in Woodson County, Kansas. The charges? Off-grid rape of a child under 14 and aggravated criminal sodomy. Now, an off-grid felony is the most serious classification you can get in Kansas law. And the alleged offense date occurred while Slife had access to children in the region, right around the exact same time Kansas DCF was closing abuse reports about him. Section 5. A systemic notification gap. Finding out last. Now, you would think, wouldn't you, that after a 13-count felony assault indictment involving his own children, someone would pick up the phone and call the father. But no. Standard child protective procedures dictate that when a child is a victim of felony assault, the state must notify the legal parent. Yet, nobody called Corey. No police officer, no DCF worker, no prosecutor. He had to discover that his children were victims of felony violence months later, completely on his own by digging through public court dockets. They literally left him completely in the dark. Section 6. 5 years, no answers. The search continues. So where does this leave everything today? Well, according to the latest court records, Jeffrey Todd's life is a multi-jurisdictional fugitive. He failed to appear for hearings in both Allen and Woodson counties. His bond revocation has been filed, and his defense attorneys have totally withdrawn from the case. The man accused of assaulting and endangering Corey's children is currently on the run, which means the safety and whereabouts of Charlie, Callie Jo, and Christian are completely unknown. Corey remains isolated from his kids, still fighting a system that seems determined not to hear him. It all leads us to this final glaring issue. If the child welfare and legal systems can literally erase a protective father, ignore a documented felony kidnapping by brushing it off as a civil matter, and completely fail to notify a parent when their kids are assaulted, then who is really protecting the children? It's a question that demands real accountability. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.